Welcome back. Another week. Rush Hour Pod. I'm T Dub. This is Justin.
Hey y'all.
Big week. Another week. Open AI. Big announcement. Google with some announcements. Where do you want to kick it off?
Why don't we kick it off with Google I/O and then we can get to OpenAI. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was kind of exciting week this week. There've been a bit of lapses in kind of like the big news stuff, kind of like some interesting articles, but this seemed to be bigger news this week. So yeah, why don't we jump into Google I/O first?
Yeah. So what were your key? Well, maybe just give everybody a quick synopsis of the takeaways from the Google I/O.
Yeah, for sure. So just for everybody to know, like Google I/O occurs once a year. It's kind of their seminal event where sometimes they talk about hardware updates, other times, software updates. Obviously, there was a lot of anticipation around this one because of kind of the crazy Gen AI race that's going on right now. So maybe I'll just kind of walk through some of the bigger announcements that they made relative to that, and then if there's any that are particularly interesting, we can perhaps go deeper into those. So again, there were no hardware, no new hardware announced, but a lot of AI and software updates. So the first thing they talked about was Gemini Nano with multimodality. So basically, this is an enhanced on-device AI model that can process text, photos, audio, web social videos, and also live video for your phone's camera, which is pretty cool in the demo they showed. And they got Gemini 1.5 Pro. It's like a more powerful cloud-based AI system that's available to global developers. They have Ask Photos, which is a new feature in Google Photos, which allows advanced search capabilities in Gemini AI. They got this new thing called AI Teammate, and basically it allows new features within Google Workspace apps for better coordination among automated routines. Project Astra, which is a visual chatbot that uses the phone camera to answer questions about the surroundings. So I think some of these videos may have gone viral, but it's really cool kind of like walking around and off and say, hey, Google, like what am I looking at right now? And where did I leave my pen on my desk and stuff like that? And it can
Yeah.
kind of tell
That
you
was
where,
cool.
which is pretty sick. And then I guess the another thing that was kind of cool was the just enhanced Google search. So AI organized search, AI overviews, multi-step reasoning, and advanced visual search in Google Lens. For any of you who haven't checked out the content, it's worth either watching, the whole presentation if you have time. Not that, you don't necessarily have time. I'm sure there are a lot of clips, but Google, I think they did a better job at really, showcasing kind of the power of their overall, platform and network and all the research they've been doing forever. So it seemed like I think it was a bullish. I think it was a bullish presentation. I don't know what you saw, T Dub, but what was your
Yeah. To
response?
me, it seemed like the real power behind it was processing sort of your Google Drive or Google Network, um, all of your Google things, so to speak, like the Google Photos. The Gmail example was really cool, where it would say, "Hey, can you give me a summary of all of the unread messages I got today? Because I've been busy," and then pull out any action items, and Google would go and look at all your unread messages, give you a summary, and you can go through it. And if there's like a Google presentation in there or a video or a YouTube video, it would also summarize that in there. I thought that stuff was really interesting in terms of like, hey, this got some really good everyday usage versus ChatGPT. Like we've talked about it, it just felt more like a novelty. It's like, oh, cool, I'm going to ask it a bunch of questions, but it didn't feel like as usable as that the you know AI can now kind of sift through and use. And I like think about it, and I'm like, all right, these are have daily applications. I can see myself actually going in there and doing it, which I was kind of forcing myself to use ChatGPT. If I'm being totally honest, I gotta have to think about things to use it for. Whereas this feels a little more integrated into the products. Would you agree?
I think so. I think that what they're trying to showcase, to your point, is the utility, like kind of the day-to-day applications that are useful. I think they did a good job conveying that, but also kind of just showcasing cool new stuff that you can do. In one part of the video that I think maybe we both saw, they had the person's dog, next to a tiger, and like say, hey, what would be a good name for like a rock band or something like that with
Yes.
these, two images, and is able to convey that as well. So, I think it has very interesting real applications. I think it pulls the creativity piece that you get from using ChatGPT into the physical world a bit more, which I think is really interesting as well. And I think it's also an extension of what we're seeing with kind of like the Vision Pro and that whole AR experience where, as opposed to having a headset, you're just using your device to have that same experience, but like you don't need to kind of be within this kind of enclosed Apple network to do it. You can just kind of be in the physical world, just using your phone, which is an incredible device to do that. So it all seemed very practical, but also like good, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, the other use case they had was like the Google Glass. It wasn't the Google Glass. It was just like a pair of camera lenses, and then looking through,
yeah,
um, and having them on and asking questions about things you're seeing. Which, yeah, that made more like we talked about it before. I bought the Meta glasses, didn't really find a use for it, but if I could use it and it could kind of go back through my day and remind me of things, that is pretty cool. Like you can go back and say, "Hey, where did I leave my keys?" And the thing would go back and be like, you left them here." There's a privacy issue. Obviously, it's constantly recording at that point, but like
yeah,
that feels like it's a little more useful for at least for your everyday life, right? If you put on a pair of glasses and it's recording that data just for you to use and search, that's pretty cool. I have to say that is really cool. I don't know how that applies to real life, but and how usable that would be. Like, hey, record every moment, everything I see, and then I can go back and search it. That seems. I mean, it's obviously here now, so it's a matter of can we actually do it.
yeah, yeah. That privacy piece is interesting because I think that's kind of what's always existed, which is like the utility that you get from certain devices or
Yeah.
software relative to how much you're giving up. And ideally,
Right.
you want to get more value, kind of more ROI to use that word in those instances
Yes.
than like than the implications of giving up your privacy. So yeah, as these things expand and iterate really quickly, it seems like that's at the forefront of a lot of these devices and
Yeah.
new kind of models and experience. But I wonder how much people will ultimately care if you just create something that's like really cool
Right.
and seems to
It's
add a lot
kind
of
of
value.
like I don't know if you remember this, but there was a time when people thought it was crazy to upload your credit card and buy something online, right? It was like,
Totally.
you think I'm going to put my credit card into some random Amazon site? Like, I don't trust that. Anyone can steal it, and then you could say the same thing about like this, right? It's like I'm going to
Yeah.
record everything I see. That's insane. Like, why would you do that? That's so unsafe. And then in 10 years, everyone's doing it. So,
Oh yeah.
you know, yeah,
Look at social media and like uploading your photo to the internet to like a website. I
right.
mean, I remember being on MySpace and Facebook back in the day, and my parents like, why would you ever do that? Now people like know where you are or know who you are, and at the time, I was just participating kind of in the culture, and that's what people did. And
Yeah.
maybe I would have said the same thing, to my kids, but like. I can only imagine what we're going to be saying to our kids by the time
No, I mean,
technology advances at that point when they're teenagers and stuff.
no, I think about the thing where we initially started this podcast. We were talking about, hey, the more information we have, the more our voices and our faces and our mannerisms are on YouTube and all of these things. Like, it's going to get the data and be able to sort of emulate the way we talk and think and all of that. The more we do these, right? So you can see a world where someone could then, as scary as it is, say, all right, pull from the Rush Hour podcast and create me a conversation between Justin and TW, and I'm gonna use
Yeah.
like it's doable. Like it seems like that's on the table now because of what we're doing, right?
Yeah, I feel
Like
like you
that
can
that's out there.
probably, yeah, I feel like you can probably do all of that now with the right tools. Like, all you need is
Yeah,
probably a few minutes of our voices, or the more you have, the better. And then you have our kind of digital likeness, and you can pull from our social accounts and writings and things like that to make it feel even more kind of realistic. And you could probably have the same conversation with our digital twins. And I think actually, I don't know if you saw this, but Reid Hoffman kind of did that.
Yeah,
The founder of
he interviewed
LinkedIn.
himself.
Yeah,
Yeah,
where he interviewed himself. If y'all haven't watched that, it's worth checking out. But I think that, yeah, that exists, which is cool, but definitely it's so interesting as we have these conversations because I vacillate between, oh man, this is awesome, and oh geez, this is like kind of
terrifying.
creepy as
Yeah,
well, like terrifying, because
yeah,
it's evolving so quickly. You don't have a time to kind of stop and think about like the ramifications before a month later.
right.
Exponential progress on where we were, a month before.
Yeah, I think about that exact use case and how cool that is, and I'm just like you. Initially, I'm like, that is so cool. Imagine, the terrible, terrible thing, but when we're gone, that our kids could then pull us up and be like, "Hey, I need to talk to my dad," and it goes and grabs the data and pulls it up, and you can come up and they can have a conversation. The flip side of that is
Yeah,
some company thing grabs our thing, calls our kid, and tries to convince them of something with our face. That's like
1,000%.
that's the flip side of like how terrifying that could be, right? It is. It's cool and scary all wrapped in one, because like if put in the wrong hands, this stuff's very dangerous. But if used correctly, it could be really enhancing your life.
Totally. Yeah.
It's we're on that brink of like, hey, what are we doing here? Like,
I
are
know.
we good or evil? Which one? Because you have some choices to make right now.
I think we're both.
Yeah,
And then it's just about like what are the guardrails that are going to be created, within the context of our society versus others. Because I think this is something we talked about before as well, which is like, hey, maybe we need to pull back on the advancements as we're moving forward, as we're
right.
moving towards like, kind of these crazy AI models that will become autonomous. But like, if we're not doing it, our adversaries or other countries are as well, and then
Somebody else is.
you just
Yeah,
can't be left behind because
right.
it's just going to impact all aspects of society. But to your point around like, hey, it could be good or bad, or there could be like some great experiences that are created around this. Maybe that's a good segue just quickly to GPT. Either it's 4.0 or 4.0. I'm not exactly sure, but they released a video presentation the day before Google I/O. Imagine, to try to step in front of them. But
Yep.
there's like these new capabilities around creating human voice and emotes, singing, handling interruptions in real time. But what I thought was the most compelling, and maybe you saw this video as well, was the founder of Khan Academy going through that math problem with his son. Did you see that video?
Yeah, really
Yeah,
cool.
that was really cool. I think about that in terms of democratizing access to education and kind of the power that will drive for particularly like underrepresented groups and countries that don't have kind of same access to information. Like imagine the great work that NGOs could do, for example, if they're able to, not even full computers, but like send a bunch of these kind of tablets out and instead of having a teacher in the U.S. or some acclaimed professor, it's the AI which can be native
Yeah.
in that person's language and kind of walk them through all the challenges that they wouldn't necessarily have been able to do on their own. So I think that stuff is really awesome, and that's kind of where we should all be aiming in terms of like the value of these platforms in terms of kind of like
Right.
how it impacts everyone's life. And I think if we can balance that with all the cool stuff and privacy, then maybe somewhere in
Yeah.
the middle, we found that we get the right mix.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at the ChatGPT 4.0, I guess 4.0, 4.0, whatever
We got
it
to
is.
figure out what that is. Yeah,
I
if
think
y'all
it's
know
I
what
think
it's supposed to, how
'cause
it's
I think it's
supposed
the
to be
letter
pronounced in
O,
the
not the
comments.
number.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I think it's similar. Like it's faster, I guess. Overall, didn't seem to really impact how I used it, but I think the biggest difference is the voice and the usability. That seems like they're making it more like they're kind of addressing the thing we talked about, which is like, hey, I have to like really come up with a way to use this thing, and they're making it much more usable where you can just talk to it,
Yep.
and then you can create it, and they can learn off of you. So like I think it's similar to Google. They're making it more of a product that has an everyday application, and I like that. Like,
Yep.
it's coming to a point where they're sort of figuring it out. It's almost an arms race of what's the AI thing that everyone's gonna. What's the Xerox version of AI? It
Yeah.
seems like ChatGPT is the one that you think of right out of the gate, but
For now,
because
yeah.
Google has such a stronghold on like so many products and all the data is there, and then integrating it on top seems like I don't know. I kind of go between the two. Like I'm like, oh, they're gonna kill Google, and then when Google does their IO, and I'm like, actually, Google Google has a leg up on
Yeah,
this
don't
thing.
don't sleep on them. Don't sleep on
Yeah,
them. Don't sleep on
I
Meta
really,
as well. Don't sleep on Amazon.
yeah,
I think we're still pretty early. I wonder if this is a winner takes all or winner takes most, and maybe we could talk through that.
right,
But as you were talking through this, it made me think about like, okay, well, from a business perspective, right? And maybe this makes sense, but like, what's the ultimate vision of what these companies are trying to get to? And in my
right,
mind, it's how do we create the interface for your entire life, right? What is the platform that you go to where now I'm thinking of creative ideas for my marketing stuff and professional context, but
yep,
I could go to ChatGPT and say, listen, these are the 10 things that are going on in my schedule today. This kid needs to be picked up and this and that other thing needs to happen. I also need to think through these brainstorms, et cetera. And it can just use its agents to go out and do that. So it can
right,
book the Uber to pick my kid up from school and text them a message to tell them what time to be ready. It can get up everything that I need, packaged up for meal planning that day. It can put together a list of 10 brainstorm topics that I can bring back to my team to make sure I'm organized on the professional side. And ultimately what that does, hopefully, is like free up a lot of time and just
right.
make you a lot more efficient. But it also, something we talked about before means you just need less people and services to kind of execute all these
Yeah,
things, which has an impact
absolutely.
on the job piece. But I think of it as like, and I wonder if you agree, like as you're just trying to, who's going to create that best interface? Who's going to create what like Siri or Alexa could have been in the grandest state, with the
Right.
flexibility that these AI models provide and best can execute on that.
Yeah. I mean, as I was talking through that, like who is going to win, like a winner take all, it's. I mean, as weird as it sounds, it kind of reminds me of like the USB lightning cable, USB C war, where it's like if we had all just agreed on one thing and all put our efforts into that,
Yeah.
we would be so much further ahead instead of like everyone trying to tout their own thing, which
Yeah.
I think is what's happening to everybody's in their own silo working on making their own products better. Whereas if they actually, I think this was part of what Sam Altman said. If we all got together and created and worked on this thing together for the greater good, it would do a lot more good for mankind. But that's hard, like because we're all behind boards and companies and things like that. You
Yeah.
just can't do that. This is not how life
Yeah.
works. So we're
That
all
that
kind of siloed in this.
Yeah, I would just say like to that Sam comment, as much as he tries to convey that, and I think generally what OpenAI is doing is fantastic stuff. It is still for now a closed system, right? It's not like open
Yes.
source kind of what
Right.
what Facebook and others are doing, and I think that their goal is to create more kind of open source models and content on OpenAI, but like ultimately that's what would really have to happen to fully
Yeah.
democratize everything.
Yeah, and that seems like a long ways away, right? Or it just seems like we're going down a path where it's like, hey, when I want to do this, I'm going to use this AI. When I want to go do this, I'm going to use this AI, and they won't. Never the worlds will collide because they're just different companies with different data, and they're going to hide all of that behind. And maybe that's good for us ultimately, right? You don't want everything in one place.
Yeah,
But
competition
yeah,
is good. I think
yeah,
competition is good.
yeah. I'm excited to see what comes next out of all this. That's for
Yeah.
sure. Like excited and terrified at the same time. I
Yeah,
guess is the right.
yeah. Well,
Cool.
maybe time back. I don't know if this necessarily ties into the exciting or terrified, but just maybe continuing on like the OpenAI news. I think something that came out today that was kind of interesting was now they have a deal with Reddit on using their posts for training data, and so this is similar to the deal that Reddit did with Google earlier. I think that was valued at like 60 million. And basically, the
Right.
agreement includes like AI-powered features for Reddit users and moderators. OpenAI will also become an advertising partner on Reddit. And, Reddit CEO basically emphasized kind of the value of including Reddit into ChatGPT for what he perceives to be, the best way to drive like a connected internet and community building. At the same time, we know that when Reddit has tried to do things for their own commercial benefit, there have been pushback from their
Right.
community. So
Right.
I don't know if there's much to delve into here outside of the news. We've talked a lot about kind of the impact of what these companies are doing to try to monetize more on their communities and having to improve their business models. But anything about this news, relative to what we talked about before that stands out?
No, I think it's really smart. Like that, we've talked about it. Reddit's got something. Like the how they use it, how they monetize it is still TBD. But like they've definitely have an incredible wealth of data and information and community that needs to be somehow. I don't know if monetized is the right word, but like kind of propped up and used in other forms. And I think they're going to figure it out, right? They've got
Yeah.
the tools now. They've IPO'd. I think people are now going to push them in a direction that maybe they would have. I mean, ultimately have gotten to before, but they're probably going to get pushed a lot faster now that they're a public company and under that kind of scrutiny, which is,
Yeah.
you could argue is good or bad. Like,
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Maybe this is a bit of a separate point, but it makes me think about kind of like when we started in the space, and obviously you got a bit before me within social consumer, and kind of like the value of these large platforms was their ability to, take all their data, but kind of optimize it towards ad serving, right? Because that was their primary business model. Whereas now, with all these companies competing and all these different models and ad platforms, I think costs more or less will kind of come down to zero, which is great for the consumer. But the thing that will stand out is like how unique and how unique is your data, how unique is your data source, and then how regularly are you kind of like updating that data source and kind of layering in new information that's coming in, and those will be the companies that do really well. And Reddit is obviously very well positioned for that. Quora could be very well positioned from that. Maybe Twitch could be well positioned for that, and others. So
Yeah.
I think depending on how well they're able to monetize this and the value that it provides to all these other companies that are pulling that data to enrich their models, it could be kind of interesting to see how that changes the business landscape.
Because I mean, I think we talked about this last week. This next generation of, I don't know if users sound so bad, but like the next generation of people aren't coming from like a search, and discover. They're not like, hey, I'm going to come up with a question. I'm going to search that thing. I know how an algorithm like works. I'm going to go search these keywords and I'm going to find the thing. They're now going to rely on companies to know what they want, and they're going to say, "Hey, I'm going to log in here. This company knows enough about me. All I need to do is swipe up enough times, and I should be able to find what I need." And I think that's where the data is really interesting. And if you look at companies like Reddit, where like people have done this, like the people like us who have done the searching, and now everyone's saved kind of the things that they love and are interested in. Like you can imagine a world where sort of almost like TikTok meets Reddit, where you just you enter the app and you swipe up and it's all the things that you love or have ever looked for and searched for and been a part of or liked is all there.
Yeah.
And that seems to be where we're going, right? Like, it's not even a question of like, hey, I need to fix my sink, or I need to whatever find the next vacation. It's going to know all of that already, and it's going to know the places you've been and the things you've liked, and it's going to tell you before you need to know. And that's, as you said, that's great and pretty scary.
Yeah.
Like that you won't need to think about those things; they're just going to appear. It's sort of like
I love
nascent
that.
to you.
I think that's totally right, and I love that line of thinking. And what it makes you think about is like, if you think of Reddit as kind of the analogy, Reddit was like how do they describe themselves? The face of the internet, or what is it? Like I forget the tagline, but it's
Front
like
page of the
the
internet.
front page of the internet, right? And so what
Yeah.
you're kind of describing is like a microcosm of that, which is like everyone now has their front page of the internet that is entirely personalized to them. And I think the really unique thing there is if you think about different form factors of like long form content, like written content or video content, if you're a platform that can really figure out the right mix between those two things, then you're creating like this kind of daily feed of content that's personalized to people. But if you look out into the future with video content and what we can do with Gen AI and gaming, et cetera, you can say, okay, hey, I want to look at all this news content, but I also want you to create this new video game for me. Or I also want you to create this new television show for me based off of all my interests here. And this is where I'm going to access all of that content as well. Maybe that's fed through some APIs from existing platforms into this view or something else. But it gets, it gets really robust really quickly. And that's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not only that, like, you think about Reddit and the ties, and you tie Facebook data, and you tie Instagram and all these things on there. And next thing you know, it's like, not only do I know what you like, I know what your friends like. I know what your influencer, like the people you follow. I know kind of what they're interested in, so I'm going to start feeding you that. So when you log into Netflix, it's going to pull all that data and say, hey, here's what everyone, here's kind of what everyone else is watching, and here's what's interesting on all the things that you've seen, and I'm going to serve you what I think will be a show you're interested in, and if if it does its job, you're probably going to like it. You're just going to log into Netflix and not search anything. It's just going to come up, and you're just going to start watching.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting,
which is wild.
That is pretty well. I think what's also interesting there is if you think about like the different business models and how it can ultimately impact, the algorithms, right? You have one world where you're subscribing to this content, and ostensibly you wouldn't necessarily need to be served ads, and then you can kind of like know in your heart of hearts that they're not trying to use any of the tactics to like add certain ads or surface some content that you may not actually be interested in, but they're kind of like putting in front of you because they're just trying to drive clicks to an advertising platform. And then there's another version which is maybe you're not paying for it, but you know that 30-40% of the content is very much ads driven, and I guess you can opt into that, but it'll be interesting to see how those different types of platforms form as well.
The advertising on all of these things, I feel like product placement and influencer, I feel like the combination that we're ultimately going to land on is kind of like Minority Report, where you're watching something and everything is just naturally an ad. You don't even really notice it, right? Like the shirt, the influencer comes on and you're going to notice the shirt, and it's going to be clickable and linkable and all the things, and you won't have as many. All the ads will be integrated into the thing already, which I don't know. I don't know how long it's going to take to get there, but that feels right. Like you're going to watch a show, and the show, everything in the show is for sale, and is clickable and linkable, and you're just kind of like trained to. I don't know if it's ignore, but like not ignore, but absorb. Those things are ads. That seems like you're going to watch an hour of content. There are going to be things in there that are just ads, and you're just going to be accustomed to it.
And that, to a certain extent, that's always existed to the extent that, like, even in movies in the 80s and 90s, you had product placements and things like that, right? Yeah. But yeah, this just takes it to the next level where, from like a performance perspective, you can take an action directly from seeing that content that you can attribute to that source in a more reliable way. And that's obviously very beneficial for advertisers. This conversation also makes you think that, at some point, maybe just make a note of that we should do a predictions. We probably should do it maybe at the beginning of the year next time, but we should definitely do a predictions episode. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, I mean, you think about even our backgrounds and what we're wearing, right? If we're just fast forward in this world where even this content is monetizable, then it's like, hey, buy the Nike shirt, buy the hat, all the affiliate, all the things happen, and then we didn't have to do any of that stuff. Like it just happens, and then we get a cut, and it's all commission based or whatever, like that. Yeah. Then you're more cognizant of what you're like. Hey, I'm gonna. Do I really love these glasses I'm gonna put on for the show because, the margin on these is pretty. I mean, I don't know. Like
I'm sure. I mean, that kind of
takes
happens
you to a place.
Yeah, that kind of happens. I imagine that kind of happens now to a certain extent in a more analog way where, creators, when they're doing content, depending on the niche, they'll say, hey, I'm wearing this and that and the other thing, and here are the links below. But in terms of like the conversion rate, right, it'd be much higher if you could just click right into the video you knew, that, as opposed to having to take the time to search and go below the fold and open up a description, like all those other steps. Right. That could definitely improve conversions. 1,000%.
Like, if I just clicked on your earbuds right now and bought them, oh, that reminds me, I need earbuds. Or, I like that
Yep.
hat, I'm going to get that hat. One click,
Uh-huh.
done, attribution, everything. It's very interesting. I mean, obviously, like, this is the way down the line, but that is like, we're not, it doesn't seem like we're that far from that world.
No, I think it's even crazy to think about. Like if you think about influencers that let's say Mr. Beast is doing a random video, but he has partnerships with three or four different apparel companies, and in real time, what they're able to do is overlay different types of clothes on them relative to
Yeah,
that demographic, right? So like you watching the
right,
video, it might be the same content, but the type of clothes and the advertisements,
right.
that stuff may actually be different depending
No,
on
that's
who you are,
crazy.
and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the equivalent is we're talking, and you see my shirt is this color, but somebody else loves pink, and it becomes pink, and it's for sale, and it right. They know you love pink and you don't like navy, or whatever the thing is,
Yeah.
it'll just swap it out for you, so you're the most appealing to your customer. That is very very doable too. I mean, it may not look great yet, but at some point, you know, you're basically just a giant green screen.
Well, yeah, and that exists to some way now, right? Like as we're aware, I don't think it was as big during the time that we were at Twitch, but you have this whole phenomenon of VTubers, right? Which is even people with kind of
Yeah,
like these virtual likenesses, and imagine that they could be any character they want, that's wearing any type of apparel they want, et cetera. That kind of also goes in the same model. So I think there's like, you know, a clear path for how that happens down the line. It's just, have the technology, the attribution, kind of advertising piece probably needs to catch up a little bit, but then that will all be integrated, and it will just be it'll be Ready Player One, man. It would just be kind of
yeah,
like the world that we talked about for a long time that we are bullish that will kind of like exist in some way, and we're slowly we're slowly getting closer to that. The question is how dystopian could that be as well? But hey, let's not get ahead of ourselves yet.
yeah. There will still be a lot of room to monetize and do some work. But
Yeah. Do you
uh,
there's some additional AI news that's kind of interesting, or we could talk about like TikTok testing stuff, or the Klarna, or anything else you want to chat about in terms of the news piece.
no, I think we covered it. We're pretty good.
Cool. All
What do you
right.
think?
Maybe Klarna just quickly because I think it's interesting as a follow up to one of the earlier episodes that we did. So just quickly, remember earlier episode where we talked about there was a huge there was a lot of like media attention on Klarna because essentially their AI chatbot can now perform the equivalent of 700 customer service jobs. They cut 10% of their workforce, and they ended up saving $40 million. So there was a recent article a few days ago that took a look at the number of Klarna employees that were actually using Gen AI now. So of their 5,000 employees, 90% use Gen AI tools daily. 87% of Klarna employees use ChatGPT and also Klarna's internal AI assistant that's called Kiki. And in terms of who's using it the most, non-technical groups are the highest users. So people in communications, 93%, marketing, 88%, and legal, 86%. And their adoption of Gen AI is higher than the broader corporate world, which is about 61%. So I just kind of mentioned that to say like how quickly we're actually starting to now see the impact
Yeah,
of Gen AI and chatbots and replacing people's work, how it's making people more efficient, how those that are kind of in the more non-technical fields seemingly are really using these to make themselves more efficient, stuff that we had talked about before
yeah.
as marketers. And so just some real world tangible numbers and data around how it's impacting these companies and how Klarna, frankly, they were having some trouble before as a public company, and now they kind of turn things around through their use of AI. So I thought that was interesting to just
It's
bring up maybe in closing.
Yeah, it seems like that customer service is obviously the first one that generally feels like it's going to replace that sort of knowledge and understanding. Creative seems like the next one that like AI is, you know, kind of got the barrel barrel down with all of the things that are happening with Dolly and others like
Yep.
creating better more and more tools that it can create and innovate and edit and all of those things. Seem like AI's come for, and then your example earlier of like, hey, give me a name, dog plus the little tiger stuffed animal, come up with some names. Like, there's some creativity there in advertising and marketing that is now it's kind of in question. Like, can you just use AI and come up? Um, I don't know how great of a name. What was it, striped golden stripes or whatever it was? I don't know how great that
Yeah,
is, but like
it
it's
gets you
still
to it gets
interesting.
you to
Like, it's
30,
right.
40%, right? The
Yeah,
start, the cold start on a lot of, like, especially when you're trying to think of creative work, right? That's the hardest
right.
part. And so to help with the idea generation, particularly if you have, resource constraints in your team, smaller teams, that's super helpful. Especially me, kind of like working earlier stage
Yeah.
startups. I mean, that's been
Yeah, you gotta
very,
like
very helpful.
corral this. Yeah, I think the I mean all of that to say, like, are our jobs, like, is every job in jeopardy right now? It's I probably have what,
Physical
20
world
more
jobs
years of
are
work
okay.
maybe. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
Physical
like
world jobs, I think, are more
I'm
safer, but
curious.
ours are, is a little
In
funky. It's
question.
definitely a little funky. But the
Yeah,
one thing
like
is like,
you won't need as many. Like, you won't need a massive team of anything. It seems like,
no,
right? If you
no.
have really efficient people with the help of AI, you could probably get a lot more done today than you could have 10 years ago.
1,000%. And I think we're seeing that. And this is probably for another conversation another time, but and something we somewhat talked about before. But if you think about like the companies that are being funded now by venture capital
Right.
post this kind of ZERP era where higher
Yep.
interest rates, et cetera, they're looking for teams that are smaller, that are more efficient, that can monetize earlier, et cetera. And if those are going to be the teams and the companies that are successful, and that's going to be the foundation for kind of the future of the economy and companies that we see in the past, then we're just going to have smaller companies, right? And so, the result of that is going to be all the impacts on the labor force that we had discussed. But
Yeah.
it's like you can see it in the tangible examples of companies that are actually able to, you know, successfully raise money and get funding now within the venture ecosystem.
Yeah. Fun times. Good times ahead. Well, appreciate your time.
Yeah, man.
That's a
Oh,
good way to
this
end
is
it.
the
We,
highlight.
we
Yeah,
hit
this
on
is
a
the
lot of
highlight of my
stuff
week.
today. Holy cow.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
No,
this
this
is
is great. This
amazing.
is
So appreciate your
a lot
time.
of fun.
And
Yeah, for sure,
we'll
man.
jump on again.
Yeah.
Subscribe below. I mean, we keep talking about a giveaway. Next week, let's actually plan a giveaway. So
Okay.
make sure you subscribe. If you want to hear about our giveaway, it's going to be some tech-related merch. I think is what we ultimately, something Twitch, something
Yeah, let's do
maybe
it.
yeah, we'll find some stuff, tees or hoodies or whatever it is. So make sure you like, subscribe below, and hear about our giveaway next week.
Cool.
Till then.
Till then, man. Later.